You awaken not to sound or sunlight, but to the sensation of suffocating inside your own body. The air around you feels like broken glass, piercing your nostrils and cutting at the soft tissues of your throat with every desperate breath. Before your eyes even open, a dull ache gnaws at your limbs. Your fingers are stiff. Your lips are cracked and frozen together. The surface beneath you is neither solid nor soft. It feels like polished ice covered in a dusting of frost. Every breath you attempt comes with sharp pain, as if the oxygen itself is biting back. You manage to crack your eyelids apart, and the world before you is blinding white. It is not snow. It is not fog. It is a curtain of frozen particles suspended in air, swirling slowly like ash in a dead atmosphere. Your eyelashes clump together with crystals. Your clothes, layered and modern, provide as much protection as wet paper. You attempt to stand, but your boots fuse slightly to the ground. The rubber stiffened and warped by the extreme cold. Every movement is a gamble with hypothermia. The silence is unbearable. No birds, no wind, no distant hum of life. Only the faint creaking of ice shifting somewhere deep beneath you. Like the earth itself is exhaling its final breath. Somewhere in your frozen mind, a fact begins to form. This is Earth. This is not a simulation, not a nightmare, not another planet. You have traveled forward in time and landed in the year 2050, and the world has died in silence. This was supposed to be a leap into the future, a journey through time meant to show you the marvels of human evolution. You imagined vertical cities defying gravity, nations united under renewable technology, artificial intelligence curating civilization, and green landscapes nurtured by centuries of progress. But when the time travel module released you from stasis, the sensors outside registered a reading your brain refused to accept. -71 degrees Celsius. No fluctuation, no warm spots, no seasons, just a new planetary constant. You did not arrive in a future of abundance. You landed in a future of extinction. Earth is now a tomb wrapped in a veil of ice. The new ice age didn't creep in gradually. It came like a guillotine. Scientists had long warned about tipping points: Arctic methane release, jet stream collapse, volcanic masking of solar heat, a disrupted oceanic conveyor. But no one thought all those triggers would cascade within months. It began in late 2048 with 3 simultaneous volcanic eruptions in the Pacific Ring of Fire, ejecting ash into the stratosphere. The sun dimmed, summer crops failed, jet streams bent out of alignment. Polar air, uncontained, poured over the continents like an invading army. By 2049, every harvest failed. Mass migration became a death sentence. Fossil fuels froze in their tanks. Solar panels iced over. Wind turbines jammed solid. Nuclear plants, abandoned in panic, triggered controlled meltdowns that provided heat, but no future, no country was ready. No one survived the blackout of global agriculture. By 2050, Earth had become one temperature. From Alaska to the Amazon, from Cairo to Cape Town, the thermometer reads the same number. Not one place on the surface is safe. This is no longer a planet of regions. It is a monoclimate of terminal cold. Wildlife is gone. Vegetation extinct. The oceans are slabs of ice. Rivers are fossils. Humanity's last breath is trapped somewhere in a bunker far below the surface. But you are not in a bunker. You are here, outside, standing in a landscape that was once familiar, now obliterated by frost. This is not a science fiction setting. This is a mathematical inevitability that happened just a few decades too early. You have no shelter, no equipment built for this temperature, and no idea what lies ahead. The cold is not just a danger, it is the dominant force of nature now. It dictates everything. Where you move, how long you can stay conscious, even what your last memory might be. And if you think the air is your biggest threat, wait until you try to take your first full breath. Because what happens in the next 60 seconds outside of shelter will prove that you were never meant to survive in this world. You take one full step forward, and the pain begins instantly. The air, far colder than anything your modern body has ever experienced, does not feel like air at all. It has mass. It has texture. It pushes into your face with the weight of needles. Within 5 seconds, your nostrils begin to freeze shut. The thin layer of moisture inside your nose crystallizes, forming jagged icicles that sting and cut as you inhale. You try to breathe through your mouth, but your saliva is already turning to slush. Your tongue feels like it has been dipped in dry ice. Every breath scrapes down your throat like you are inhaling microscopic glass. The lungs, delicate and never meant for this world, begin to seize. You start coughing uncontrollably. Each cough tears at your throat. You are not sick, but your body believes it is dying, and it is right. By the 10th second, your fingers, even inside gloves, start to burn. It is not a pleasant warmth. It is a signal. Your nerves are screaming as your blood begins to retreat inward, abandoning your extremities in a desperate attempt to keep your heart pumping. Your hands curl involuntarily. Your skin begins to blister beneath the fabric. Your boots, thick and designed for alpine conditions, are already losing their flexibility. You can feel your toes becoming numb. Beneath you, the ground doesn't crunch like snow. It sounds like crushed bones. The ice underfoot is ancient now, having compacted into something more like fractured quartz than any frozen water you've known. By the 20th second, your eyes begin to freeze. You blink out of reflex, but the moisture on your eyelids starts to harden. Tiny needles form along the lashes, latching together with each blink. If you close your eyes for more than a second, you risk sealing them shut. You try to keep them open, but they water uncontrollably from the sheer cold. And those tears begin to freeze midstream, streaking your face with thin, icy tracks. The skin on your cheeks begins to crack. Not gently, not like chapped lips, but like an old stone splitting from within. Blood wells up, but doesn't flow. It thickens, slows, freezes. By the 30th second, mental clarity begins to fade. Your brain, no longer receiving warm blood fast enough, begins to struggle. Your thoughts grow sluggish. Focus becomes slippery. You know something is wrong, terribly wrong, but the cold has dulled your ability to panic. Your survival instincts are alive, but they're operating through a fog. You want to run, but your muscles resist the signal. Your knees shake. Your breath becomes shallow and uneven. The world around you starts to shimmer, not with beauty, but with hallucination. Frostbite begins not as blackened skin, but with confusion. By the 40th second, your hearing fades. Not because there is nothing to hear, but because the delicate tissues of your ears are freezing solid. The cartilage stiffens. The world goes quieter. The crunch beneath your feet becomes a distant memory. There is no wind, but it feels like there is. The cold itself creates an illusion of movement. You spin slightly in place, unsure of where you are. All landmarks have vanished under snow and frost. There is no direction anymore. North, south, east, west, they are meaningless in a world that no longer rotates in your favor. By the 50th second, your skin has gone pale. The blood has vanished from the surface. Your lips are blue. You do not notice the shivering anymore. You are past it. Your body is moving into shutdown. Voluntary movement becomes nearly impossible. You are standing, but it is not by choice. You have locked into position. Ice is forming between the folds of your clothing. The fabric crackles when you move. Your breath, still visible in front of you, becomes shorter, less consistent. Each exhale feels like it takes more from you than it gives back. By the 60th second, your core temperature has dropped by several degrees. The medical term is hypothermia, but out here, it just means you are fading. Your heart is slowing, not rapidly, but inevitably. Your vision starts to darken at the edges. You are not dead. Not yet, but you are no longer alive in any way that counts. You have entered a state of suspended suffering. The cold doesn't kill you outright. It strips you second by second, molecule by molecule. It silences your body without violence. There are no screams, no dramatic falls, just a slow, irreversible stillness. You haven't even walked a full minute, and already your body is beginning to betray you. But what froze your breath was only the beginning. What truly sealed your fate began decades before, when civilization believed it was invincible and failed to see the avalanche coming. The fall of civilization was not marked by an explosion or a singular event. There was no final war, no alien invasion, no comet strike. The end came quietly, like breath fogging against glass before it disappears. Within months of the temperature drop, humanity's structures, physical, social, and psychological, began to disintegrate at every level. The world, once loud with machinery, traffic, commerce, and conversation, went silent. Urban centers were the first to suffer. Cities, built for heat management, for airflow and electricity, were unprepared for absolute cold. Skyscrapers that had touched the clouds stood tall for only a few weeks longer before glass. Panels popped from their frames and steel beams contracted and cracked. Emergency services tried to respond. Fire trucks were deployed, but froze in place. Hospitals overflowed before their heating systems failed, and the automatic doors jammed shut from expanding frost. Doctors and nurses began operating in full winter gear under failing LED lights, amputating frostbitten limbs with no anesthesia, using scalpels warmed only by their own body heat. Eventually, when the fuel ran out, the lights faded and patients died, still strapped to gurneys. Medical staff followed soon after. In rural areas, the collapse came slower, but no less cruel. Farmland turned to iron-hard wastelands. Soil froze solid, a meter deep. Tractors and combines sat lifeless in barns that collapsed under the weight of accumulating snow. Generators roared for a few days longer in these regions, but when diesel froze in its tanks and batteries shattered from thermal stress, the dark descended there as well. Livestock, unable to graze, perished in fields and stalls. The stench of death never reached human noses. The bodies froze before decomposition could begin. Across the globe, the rich initially fared better. In places like Dubai, New York, and Singapore, ultra-wealthy elites retreated into high-tech underground shelters, supported by private security and solar-powered life support systems. These bunkers were masterpieces of human arrogance. They were stocked for decades, filtered for radiation, shielded from attack, but they were not built for a world without sun. Without steady solar input, energy systems collapsed within months. The air grew thin, the batteries degraded, and the help, the security, the engineers, the cooks, realized they were just as doomed and began to leave, or worse, turn on their employers in acts of quiet desperation. Eventually, these bunkers became tombs filled with the elite and the illusion of control. Religious institutions struggled to remain beacons of hope. At first, churches, mosques, temples, and synagogues became shelters. Thousands gathered in sacred spaces, praying for reversal, for warmth, for some miracle to thaw the world. Priests blessed melting ice over fire pits. Imams led prayers with frozen beards. Monks lit candles that could no longer keep their fingers warm. But prayers could not warm a frozen heart. People huddled shoulder to shoulder until the warmth of shared breath no longer mattered. Then silence. Then nothing. Schools were abandoned mid-lesson. Students left half-finished math problems on desks that would never be touched again. In wealthier countries, children were sent home with blankets and ration packs. In poorer ones, they simply never returned. Universities tried to remain open virtually, but the internet failed when the fiber lines cracked and satellite receivers lost calibration. The world's collective knowledge, the cloud, digital libraries, education systems, was rendered inaccessible, buried under meters of snow and crushed beneath the weight of frost. In prisons, inmates died in mass. Heating systems failed. Guards abandoned their posts. Steel doors froze shut or rusted open. Those who were trapped died of cold. Those who escaped walked into a world more hostile than the one they left. Refugee camps became death camps. Tents and tarps collapsed. Stoves failed, and aid stopped arriving. No planes, no trucks, no hope. Entire populations froze to death in silence. Government systems unraveled not from insurrection, but from the impossibility of coordination. Politicians gave their final speeches from underground bunkers. Presidents declared states of emergency over satellite links, visible only to those who still had working screens. When networks fell, decisions ceased. Leaders were cut off from their people. Local mayors became warlords or martyrs. Parliaments emptied. Elections were cancelled, not from tyranny, but because no one could stand outside long enough to vote. Economies, global and local, disintegrated. Stock markets closed permanently. Currency froze in place. There was no value in paper, no function in gold, and no room for cryptocurrency in a world where there was no electricity. Barter returned briefly, but what was there to trade in a world with no crops, no heat, and no mobility? A liter of diesel became worth more than a human life. But even that didn't last. Relief efforts failed across continents. The United Nations tried to coordinate a response until its Geneva headquarters was encased in ice. The last World Conference on Climate Response happened via radio. A static-filled exchange between leaders huddled in isolated bunkers. Then the radio went dead. There were no armies to deploy, no routes to send aid, no airfields to land supply planes. Humanitarian organizations were abandoned, not by intent, but by impossibility. And still, the cold came. In Africa, the equatorial heat collapsed instantly. Forests petrified. Deserts became plains of frozen sand. In South America, the Amazon froze solid, trees snapping like twigs under frost pressure. The slums of Rio, Caracas, and Lima became ice-crusted graveyards. In Asia, cities like Delhi, Bangkok, and Jakarta, once overcrowded, emptied in days. High-rises became ice cliffs. The Great Wall vanished beneath the snow. In Europe, the rivers froze mid-flow. The Thames, the Danube, the Seine turned into jagged white scars across blackened cities. In Australia, red sands became blinding white deserts of frost, while kangaroos and wombats died, standing up, caught mid-step by cold that acted faster than their instincts. There was no escape. The cold was everywhere. There were no borders anymore. No governments, no treaties, no war zones. The world was unified at last, but unified by extinction. But even extinction doesn't happen all at once. As the systems fell and the silence deepened, what came next was not dramatic, but slow, cruel, and far more personal. Because now, with no infrastructure to save you, the buildings and machines you once trusted become your final enemies. It began with cracks. Silent ones, at first, hairline fractures spidering across concrete, barely visible to the human eye. Roads, bridges, walls, and towers, all of them began to betray their purpose. Steel, once the skeleton of the modern world, became its downfall. At -71 degrees Celsius, even tempered alloys shrank and snapped like brittle glass. Buildings groaned under their own weight, their load-bearing columns compromised by ice that crept into microscopic imperfections. Skyscrapers did not explode or collapse all at once. They folded. Floors pancaked silently. Interiors compressed like paper. Office chairs, conference tables, and ceiling panels were compacted into a single mass of crushed synthetic debris. Elevators, long frozen between floors, became vertical coffins for those who sought refuge in their steel cages. In residential zones, the destruction came in layers. Roofs buckled under the pressure of accumulated snow. Chimneys cracked from within. Gas lines froze and ruptured, leaking into homes that would later detonate in sudden, eerie fireballs, brief blooms of light in an otherwise lightless world. Water heaters exploded when the pressure inside them exceeded the tolerance of frozen pipes. Living rooms were transformed into ice chambers, kitchens into frost-covered morgues. Family photos froze in their frames, glass fracturing from the internal strain. People who took shelter inside, hoping to wait out the worst, died in the very structures they had believed would protect them. Underground systems collapse next. Subways, once the arteries of modern cities, became traps. The people who fled underground, hoping to avoid the surface cold, quickly discovered that the Earth's crust no longer offered insulation. The tunnels, never designed for long-term habitation, iced over from above and below. Power was gone. Emergency lighting flickered, then died. Trains stalled in mid-tunnel, their interiors frosting over like abandoned meat lockers. The passengers inside, unable to pry open frozen doors, died sitting upright, eyelids ice shut, hands curled around frozen phone screens, still searching for a signal. Ventilation shafts became conduits for the cold. What little heat remained underground was pulled out by the pressure differential, replaced with a creeping death that flowed like invisible water. Hospitals, the final line of defense in any crisis, became tombs. Backup generators that had powered emergency wards faltered. Oxygen tanks froze. IV lines turned to ice inside patients' veins. Defibrillators sparked once, twice, then nothing. Nurses tried to warm patients with blankets, their own hands shaking too hard to insert IVs. Doctors screamed for more time, more fuel, more heat, but there was none. Medical refrigeration systems failed, spoiling blood bags and antibiotics. Biohazard containers cracked open. Morgues overflowed. And, in the worst irony of all, the sterile environment of the modern hospital turned into a frozen breeding ground for death. Clean, organized, and utterly inescapable. Infrastructures of communication failed just as thoroughly. Radio towers twisted and snapped in blizzards. Fiber optic cables beneath the sea froze and fractured. Telephone lines became clotheslines for frost. The satellites that remained overhead were still technically functional, but they orbited a planet that could no longer receive their signals. With no power to route data and no engineers left to repair the routers, the entire digital nervous system of the planet went dark. The internet, once infinite, vanished without ceremony. The world became silent, not by censorship or war, but because the cold froze every word before it could be spoken, and the cold kept pressing in. Nuclear facilities presented a unique terror. Many went into automatic shutdown as temperatures plunged, but others, left unsupervised, experienced thermal regulation failure. Some melted down quietly beneath the ice. Others triggered containment procedures that locked themselves off forever. The ones that remained functional became impossible to approach. The cooling systems required constant energy, but there was no one left to maintain them. In some places, radioactive plumes rose slowly through the cracks in the ice, invisible clouds of contamination drifting across already dead cities. These areas became doubly cursed, frozen, and toxic. Geiger counters, if they still functioned, ticked faintly under layers of frost, warning no one. Water systems collapsed. Reservoirs froze solid. Plumbing shattered. In major metropolitan areas, entire sewer systems cracked open beneath the surface, releasing gases and waste into sub-zero tunnels that froze into sculptural horrors. Toilets became useless. Showers, once taken for granted, became impossible luxuries. People collected snow to melt, but even that became dangerous. Atmospheric ash from volcanic events and industrial collapse had tainted the snowpack. Drinking it introduced heavy metals and toxins. Boiling it was out of the question. There was no firewood, no gas, no power, even transportation. The great symbol of human mobility failed utterly. Airplanes were grounded permanently. Their internal fluids froze. Jet engines cracked apart. Runways disappeared under meters of snow. Ships drifting at sea when the Ice Age began found themselves trapped as oceans turned to cement. Crews on cargo vessels died locked inside their own holds, unable to generate enough heat to survive. The great ports of the world, Shanghai, Rotterdam, Los Angeles, became docks for frozen tombs. Trucks and trains ceased moving within days. Fuel gelled. Rubber turned brittle. Roads became indistinguishable from fields. Tires spun helplessly on glass-slick surfaces before shattering completely. No part of the modern world was designed for permanence. Everything relied on maintenance, movement, and mildness. None of it was built to endure a world where cold was not a season, but a law of nature. Humanity's great structures, airports, data centers, oil rigs, libraries, solar farms, greenhouses, each one failed in sequence. Not from violence, but from fragility, from dependence. And with every building that cracked, every tunnel that froze, and every light that went out, the skeleton of human civilization crumbled a little more. But infrastructure was just the body. The soul of civilization was food. And when the systems that fed billions were silenced by cold, the real horror began. Because in a frozen world, the first to die are not the weakest, but the hungriest. At first, no one thought food would run out. Warehouses were full. Supermarkets were stocked. Governments assured the public that reserves were adequate, that logistics would adapt. that human ingenuity had faced worse. But optimism is a fragile thing, and food systems are delicate chains stretched across the planet, tight, thin, and utterly dependent on temperature, fuel, and timing. When the cold came, it snapped those chains in 1,000 places at once. Crops were the first to fall. Every field across every continent was blanketed in snow and ice within days of the global plunge. Cornfields in the Midwest, rice paddies in Southeast Asia, wheat plains in Ukraine, vineyards in Italy, all turned into identical wastelands of ice-blasted soil. Nothing remained green. Nothing survived. Seeds froze before they could sprout. Roots snapped under the weight of frozen water in the soil. Farmers who went out to inspect their fields were often found hours later, frozen in place beside the furrows they once tended. Tractors and irrigation rigs stood frozen mid-function, monuments to a war lost without a fight. Greenhouses, once the hope for urban farming and sustainability, fared no better. Most were shattered by thermal stress as their glass frames cracked from the sudden plunge. The ones that didn't implode suffered from power failure. Artificial lighting and climate control systems failed in the first days of the blackout. Within hours, the interior temperature dropped to match the outside world. Plants wilted, then blackened, then crystallized. Urban rooftop farms vanished beneath snow. Vertical farms in skyscrapers turned into icy ruins. Aeroponics, hydroponics, and aquaponics, every high-tech miracle agriculture had offered, was undone by a single law. Water freezes, and when it does, it kills. Livestock followed swiftly. Cows, pigs, chickens, goats. None of them evolved for this. Barns collapsed. Feeding systems failed. Water troughs turned to solid ice. Farmhands who tried to care for the animals died beside them, huddled in hay that offered no warmth. The few who tried to migrate herds south found only deeper frost and no pasture. Soon, highways were littered with frozen animals, their hooves locked to asphalt, their bodies stiff with frost. Dairy farms stopped producing within days. Egg supplies ceased. Meat processing plants shut down, first from power loss, then from labor collapse, and finally from infestation as rodents, in desperation, attacked the dead and dying. Fishing was impossible. The oceans, once a great global pantry, froze along their coasts and then deep into their interiors. Ice sheets spread across the Atlantic and Pacific, sealing shipping lanes and suffocating marine ecosystems. Fishing trawlers were locked in place. Nets snapped beneath the weight of ice. Coral reefs died unseen, and oxygen levels in the oceans plummeted. What fish remained fled to depths unreachable by any human technology. Culture farms, salmon pens, shrimp tanks, oyster beds froze completely. The taste of seafood became myth within weeks. Supermarkets became war zones. In the first days, shoppers calmly filled carts, believing that restocking trucks were only delayed. But the trucks never came. And when it became clear that they wouldn't, panic erupted. Shelves were emptied. Freezers were looted. Fights broke out over instant noodles, canned beans, baby formula. Employees fled. Security systems failed. Stores were raided, not just for food, but for warmth, plastic wrappings, cardboard boxes, anything that could burn. The smell of food was replaced by the stench of sweat, smoke, and decay. Warehouses and distribution centers became contested territory. Gangs formed quickly, sometimes organized crime, sometimes desperate citizens forming mobs with firearms and forklifts. They seized trucks, guarded storage units, and established food four-axis bartering systems. But even these centers could not last. Most of the food spoiled or froze. Refrigerated goods became blocks of unusable sludge. Produce turned to mush under frost. Even shelf-stable items like pasta and rice became unpalatable. When stored at extreme sub-zero temperatures for too long, chemical breakdown, packaging failure, rat infestation. Famine does not announce itself. It waits until people are too weak to fight back. In refugee camps, the hunger arrived first. Children died quietly, curled into their parents. Mothers stopped producing milk. Fathers withered before they could find aid. International food programs collapsed. There were no planes, no convoys. Drones froze mid-flight. The last airdrops occurred in early 2049. Boxes of food fell through the sky like salvation, only to crack open on impact and scatter their contents to the wind. Within weeks, the camps were dead zones. No one came to bury the bodies. In bunkers and underground cities, ration management became a science of despair. People weighed every spoonful. Nutritionists became executioners. Anyone who consumed more than their share was punished. Anyone who hoarded faced trial. But even the strictest rationing could not extend the inevitable. Greenhouses in shelters failed due to mechanical collapse or mold. Seed banks were compromised by internal condensation. Hydroponic labs grew too slowly. Vitamin deficiencies set in. Hair fell out. Teeth loosened. Eyes dimmed. Then came the hunger madness, known in the old world as starvation psychosis. Some wept, some turned violent. Some, most terrifyingly, simply went silent and stopped moving at all. Some turned to alternatives. First, pets, then rodents. Cannibalism was never discussed publicly, but it occurred in pockets, in basements, in shelters, in the corners of cities where fire still burned and smell could be masked. The moral line shifted with every calorie lost. History repeated itself, as it always does when food disappears. But this time, there was no future generation left to remember the shame. No food, no farms, no fishing, no more. Only hunger curled in your belly like a sleeping animal, waiting to wake and consume you from within. But even hunger wasn't the cruelest part. The real horror began when your last hope was shelter, because in this new ice age, the walls you trusted become the walls that trap you. When the cold became too much, people fled indoors. It was instinctive, ancestral even. Seek four walls, a roof, a place where the wind cannot reach you. For a time, it felt like the right move. People huddled together in apartments, basements, community centers. They gathered blankets, stuffed towels into cracks beneath doors, taped up windows with cardboard and foil. They burned candles, gas stoves, even books and furniture. They closed themselves off from the outside world, convinced they could outlast it. But what they didn't realize was that the homes they retreated to weren't shelters. They were coffins waiting to be sealed. Most buildings were never meant to retain heat without power. The insulation that once kept homes comfortable in winter was useless against temperatures colder than the South Pole. Walls froze from the inside. Pipes embedded in concrete floors burst and flooded interiors with ice. Doors, once mechanisms of privacy, expanded and warped until they could no longer open. Windows cracked under internal pressure. Everything became brittle. Entire families sat wrapped in quilts, breathing into each other's necks, their body heat the only source of warmth. But the cold was relentless. It seeped in like poison gas, silent, invisible, patient. Soon, indoor temperatures dropped to match the outside. Kitchens became unusable. Cabinets filled with cans that couldn't be opened without fire. Refrigerators became irrelevant, their contents already frozen. Televisions, computers, mobile phones, all dead, not just unpowered, but shattered. Batteries swelled, screens cracked, processors warped. Even the light of a screen was a memory. People began to move less. Every movement burned calories they could no longer afford to waste. They lay still, wrapped in whatever they could find. Clothing, carpets, plastic tarps, until they stopped moving altogether. Some homes caught fire as people burned furniture, plastic, insulation, anything to fight the cold. For a moment, it worked. Rooms lit with orange glow. Shadows danced on the walls. But burning wood indoors releases smoke, and plastic releases poison. Without ventilation, entire households asphyxiated in their own makeshift campfires. Fire departments no longer existed. Neighbors no longer knocked. A house burning in the distance was no longer a warning. It was a signal that someone else had tried and failed to survive. Others sought safety underground. Sub-basements, metro stations, parking garages, anywhere lower meant a chance at warmer air. But lower levels meant rising moisture, which meant freezing from within. Water condensed on concrete walls, then turned to ice sheets. Ceilings cracked. Elevators stopped working, and stairwells became frost-covered death traps. Entire apartment towers became vertical mausoleums, each floor colder than the last. On the top levels, people died of exposure. On the bottom, they drowned in ice. Some still believed in government shelters, those mythical bunkers prepped for nuclear war or biohazard emergencies. In some regions, crowds descended on municipal emergency shelters, only to find them locked, frozen, or already filled beyond capacity. The heating systems inside ran on backup generators that sputtered and died within days. What followed was chaos, overcrowding, starvation, violence. Those who had food hoarded it. Those who had space were overrun. Sanitation collapsed. Disease, once feared in heat, now bloomed in cold, where waste had no place to go. When the power finally failed, the locks froze shut. The doors that were meant to keep people out now sealed them in. No one left, but the most disturbing shelters were the high-tech ones. The deep earth bunkers built by the rich, by the paranoid, by the engineers who thought they had planned for everything. They had hydroponics, filtration, heat regulation, electric lighting, even libraries and VR recreation rooms. For a few months, they were warm, quiet, safe, until the math caught up. Systems failed, one by one. Pumps burned out. Circuits corroded. Filters clogged. AI assistants fell silent. Then the food began to spoil. Power flickered. Water became stale. Rats appeared. Mold spread in the vents. And worse than all of that, paranoia set in. Some shelters fell to madness, others to quiet despair. The people inside stopped speaking. They ate in silence. They slept in silence. And then, one day, they stopped waking up. The air grew stale. The lights dimmed. And the world outside didn't notice. The earth was already mourning 10 billion lives. 100 more behind titanium-reinforced doors meant nothing. You might think your home would protect you, that walls and roofs and locks could preserve your life. But in a world where every material turns against you, where cold waits patiently at every seam, shelter is not salvation. It is the illusion of safety. But if you think the shelter was your last line of defense, wait until the sky itself turns against you. Because, in the new ice age, the heavens do not bring hope or warmth. They bring storms that kill faster than bullets. You look upward, searching for something, anything, beyond the endless white. But there is no sky, no blue, no sun, no stars. No stars, no familiar horizon to orient yourself. Above you is a churning sheet of lightless gray, a ceiling that never opens. The clouds are not clouds anymore. They are slabs. They are walls. They press downward, heavy with frozen ash and vapor, thick with volcanic dust and industrial residue from the last spasms of human civilization. The atmosphere is sick, choked. The air carries weight that you cannot see but can feel in your lungs. Each breath tastes like crushed metal and scorched plastic. You are not just freezing, you are inhaling extinction. When the sun disappeared behind this veil, everything changed. There were no more shadows, no more night and day, only gradients of dimness. Time lost meaning. The earth no longer revolved beneath warmth. It spun in a silent, gray cage. Scientists once predicted ice ages triggered by orbital shifts or magnetic anomalies. But the new ice age was different. It was manufactured by a perfect storm of human misjudgment and geological cruelty. Volcanic eruptions in the Pacific Ring of Fire had blanketed the skies with particulate matter, reflecting solar radiation back into space. At first, people thought it was temporary, an unusual winter, maybe a volcanic winter that would clear. But it didn't clear, thickened. As the upper atmosphere cooled, it compressed. Weather systems collapsed in on themselves. Jet streams fractured and stalled. Cold air pooled in ways never before seen in climate models. Precipitation fell as hypercondensed snow mixed with microscopic shards of frozen chemical residue. Glittering particles that cut the skin and eyes like sandblasted glass. Blizzards became white hurricanes, slamming across continents in waves. These storms didn't swirl, they charged. They punched holes through forests and buried cities in 20-meter walls of wind-packed snow. There were no clear skies between storms, no recovery windows. Satellite imagery ceased to function because there was nothing left to image. Only static fields of cloud and ice stretching from pole to pole. The color blue vanished from human life. The warmth of sunlight, once taken for granted, became a myth passed around like religion. People no longer asked, "Is it cold today?" They asked, "Is it storming yet?" And the answer was always yes. During the worst atmospheric events, the sky itself roared. The air would vibrate with subsonic pressure waves, unsettling the stomach and triggering migraines. Dogs whimpered, and birds, those that hadn't died already, flew in endless circles before dropping from the sky, disoriented and starving. Ice storms didn't just fall vertically. The winds threw frozen water sideways, embedding it into buildings like bullets. Cars were torn open. Windows exploded inward. Entire homes were sanded smooth by the abrasion of supercooled crystals. Roads, already buried, were erased. Mountains changed shape under layers of accumulating wind-driven frost. Auroras, once beautiful, became monstrous. With the magnetosphere destabilized by solar disruption and the cold sharpening every contrast in the upper atmosphere, the aurora borealis stretched far beyond the poles, bleeding across the skies of every continent. Their colors turned sickly, greens tainted with bruised purples and diseased yellows, flickering in silence above landscapes that no longer contained life. People stared up at them in horror, unsure if what they were seeing was natural or supernatural. Children, if any remained, were told to avoid looking directly at them. Some claimed that staring too long induced hallucinations, visions of warmth that weren't real. Some wandered off in pursuit of imagined light and were never seen again. The absence of sun affected more than just warmth. Plants, what few remained in sheltered biolabs or underground labs, began to die from photonic starvation. Without the full spectrum of sunlight, photosynthesis halted. Artificial lights, powered by dwindling generators, couldn't replace the complexity of natural light. Trees in warmer latitudes, whose roots had survived longer than expected, finally gave out, not from cold, but from lack of light. Chlorophyll vanished, leaves blackened. The planet turned gray and white and stayed that way. Human psychology deteriorated quickly. Without the rise and fall of the sun, circadian rhythms unraveled. People lost track of time. Sleep became irregular. Mental health declined across all remaining population clusters. Depression, anxiety, hallucinations. Every symptom of isolation and sensory deprivation magnified by a sky that offered no comfort. No one knew what day it was. Birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, gone. Even timekeeping devices became unreliable. Clocks ran, but with no sunlight to sync against. The concept of morning disappeared. You want to scream at the sky to break its silence, but the sound would be swallowed before it left your throat. There is no echo, no birdsong, no jet trail, no blue. The sky is no longer a canvas for weather or memory or hope. It is a dome of death, suffocating the planet beneath a pressure. No species, no soul was built to endure. And when lightning does strike, it does not crack or flash. It pulses slowly through the sky, like a warning from the gods. A reminder that this is no longer Earth as you knew it. This is the graveyard of light. But even the poisoned sky is not the worst of it, because what really ends you isn't what falls from above. It's what rides the wind in from every direction, carving flesh from bone. The blizzards are coming, and they do not stop. The first time you encounter an ice storm in the year 2050, you mistake it for a wall. Not a storm, not a system. A wall, towering, solid, and fast. There is no warning, no rumble of thunder, no scent of rain, only a deepening of the gray around you, a sudden weight in the air, like the planet itself has taken a breath and is holding it. Then, from the horizon, the sky begins to move. You don't realize what it is until the wind hits. It does not howl. It screeches, high-pitched, sharp, like metal grinding against metal. Then comes the sound of a million needles striking all at once. Ice, weaponized by wind, hurls across the landscape at over 200 kilometers per hour. It slices through anything soft, shatters anything brittle, and cracks anything rigid. The temperature drops 10 more degrees in seconds. You try to move, to hide, but it's already too late. The storm doesn't need hours to kill. It needs minutes. The air becomes a horizontal river of violence. Snow is not powder. It's shrapnel. Each particle is dense, sharp-edged, and moving at fatal velocity. It doesn't fall. It rips sideways. Visibility drops to less than half a meter. You stretch your arm in front of you and see nothing. Your hand disappears into a gray void. Breathing becomes impossible. The wind tears at your mask, rips open seams in your clothing, drives icy particles into your eyes and nostrils and ears. Structures offer no protection. Windows implode from the rapid temperature shift and suction pull. Cars are lifted off the ground, spun, then dropped. Steel bends, concrete cracks. The sound inside a shelter during an ice storm is worse than the storm itself. It is deafening. You can hear the wind trying to chew through the walls. You hear nails pop from boards, the creak of foundation beams, the screech of metal twisting, and always, always the hiss of snow being forced into every crevice, every gap, every flaw in the structure. Snow piles indoors. It creeps up walls. It settles on your skin, even inside your clothes. There is no such thing as sealed. Entire landscapes change shape in the aftermath of a single storm. Hills vanish. Roads are swallowed. Forests become fields of ice-encased skeletons. Trees freeze, mid-sway, and snap under their own weight. Rivers, once frozen solid, now disappear under new snowdrifts, dozens of meters deep. Navigation becomes impossible. Landmarks are erased. Survivors who attempt to tunnel out often lose their bearings, dig in the wrong direction, and never see light again. Communication fails completely during a storm. Radios crackle with static. GPS is useless. Compass needles spin. People scream, but the storm absorbs it. It becomes part of the noise. Rescuers cannot find you. Drones cannot fly. Dogs cannot track scent when all scent is frozen. If you are lost, you are gone. Entire settlements vanish. Not a trace, no sign of resistance. Just a white plain where life once stood. Storm duration varies. Some pass in under an hour, leaving behind destruction and eerie stillness. Others last 4 days. Days of blinding noise, shaking walls, and unrelenting darkness. During those storms, people lose their minds. In bunkers, in shelters, in vehicles, they start to hear voices in the wind. Some claim to see figures moving outside. Others speak to loved ones who are already dead. The cold becomes secondary to the psychological erosion. Time stretches, hours blur, hunger sets in, water freezes, batteries die, and when the storm ends, silence doesn't bring relief. It brings dread. Because once it's over, you have to go outside, and what awaits you outside is worse. The world is not as you left it. What little you build for protection is gone. The food is gone. The fuel is gone. Your neighbors are gone. The cold has moved in deeper, buried everything beneath a suffocating crust. You dig, you call out. No one answers. They were buried alive, or flung into the trees, or simply taken by the wind. And these storms are not rare. They are constant, cyclical, like a predator returning to check if its prey has returned to life. There are no weather forecasts anymore. No names, no categories. There is no point. The ice storms are not events. They are the rhythm of this new earth. You cannot outrun them. You cannot wait them out. You can only hope you are already dead before the next one arrives. But as the storms strip away the last shelter and leave behind frozen corpses, something darker begins to bloom within the few survivors who remain. Hunger takes on a new form. It begins to speak. And what it asks of you, you can never undo. It doesn't happen immediately. It never does. At first, hunger is manageable. It gnaws quietly, a dull emptiness in your gut, a constant craving you try to ignore. You ration, you count calories. You find joy in scraping the last spoonful from a can. You eat in silence with others watching. Every swallow is a calculation. You drink snow, knowing it might carry pollutants. You chew strips of leather, paper, or cloth just to simulate fullness. Your stomach groans. Your skin begins to loosen around your bones. Your vision narrows. You start sleeping more, not from peace, but because your body is conserving what little energy it has left. And yet, you believe, for a time, that you can make it through, that you'll find food, that someone will come. But no one comes. After days without nourishment, the body turns inward. It begins to digest itself. Your muscles deteriorate. Your face hollows. Thoughts become slower, darker, scattered. You no longer stand for long periods. Your fingernails turn pale. The light in your eyes begins to dull. You dream of eating, not delicacies, not meals, but anything. Bark, rocks, snow packed with dirt. You'd eat your own shoes if they weren't already burning in the stove. And then, one day, you smell something familiar. Not food, not fire, flesh, human flesh. The first moment is not an act, it is a question. You see someone die, quietly, frozen in their sleep, limbs curled toward their chest, breath stopped. They do not move. They are gone, and something in you wonders. You stare too long at their arm, their cheek, their ribs. It is not conscious desire. It is not madness. It is biology. Survival logic, whispering to a part of you older than speech. You bury the thought for a while. You bury the body, too, at least the first few. But burial is hard in frozen earth. The ground won't open. The tools are gone. You can't dig through snow that packs like concrete, so you cover them in blankets, or leave them on a cot, or sit beside them for hours, then days, and the smell fades, and all you see is meat. You tell yourself it's disgusting, that you would never, that you are not like that, but your body is dying. Your hands shake, your heart races. And finally, when the cold becomes unbearable, and the ache in your gut becomes louder than your fear, you act. It begins with a knife, a clean cut. You choose carefully. An arm, a thigh. Something that doesn't feel too much like desecration. You don't look them in the face. You move slowly, gently, as if they might still wake. You wrap the peas in cloth. You cook it in silence. You don't speak. No one does. Those still alive sit around the fire, their eyes flicking to the pot and then away. No one asks. No one refuses. The room is filled with the sound of chewing and quiet, weeping. You tell yourself it's survival, that you didn't kill them, that you're only using what nature provided, that it's temporary, that it's the last time. But deep inside, you already know the line has moved. Soon, others die. Some slip into sleep and never wake. Some lose the will to keep breathing. Some, possibly, are helped along. It becomes harder to tell. Suspicion grows. You begin watching each other. Sleep with one eye open. Hide knives. Eat alone. Divide the portions in secret. The group fractures. It's no longer we. It's me. Every bite brings warmth. Every bite brings shame. Until the shame fades. Until it becomes normal. Outside, the storms rage. Inside, the fire burns with bone and blood. And the stories change. The children, those who survive, are told myths. That the meat came from animals. That the group made a pact. That it was holy. That it was mercy. Truth melts in the cold. And all that remains is the act. Eventually, when bodies run out, eyes turn inward. Weakness becomes a liability. The sick are watched with interest. The wounded are no longer protected. A twisted form of logic takes over. If they will die anyway, why not? Decisions once unthinkable are now debated with calm precision. Who will go first? Becomes a conversation. Who is the most expendable? Becomes strategy. And you, once horrified, find yourself agreeing because survival has no dignity. And in the final days of the human experiment, with morality shattered and civilization erased, the only thing stronger than hunger is the fear that you might be next. But even if you resist that final descent, even if you manage to hold on to your humanity, your body won't forgive you. Because in this new world, even if you beat the hunger, your own biology begins to betray you. And when that happens, no willpower can save you. You thought you could endure it. That survival was just a matter of mindset. That if you could keep your mind sharp and your decisions clean, you could outlast the worst. But the cold is not just outside you. It is inside now. It has crept under your skin, into your muscles, into your blood. It has become part of your biology. Your body, once your last refuge, has begun to turn against you. It starts with numbness, not the kind you shake off. This is a deeper silence. Your fingertips go first, then your toes. The sensation doesn't return. You prick them, stab them, bite them, nothing. They become alien, useless weights dangling at the ends of your limbs. Blackness creeps in. Not metaphorical blackness, literal. The skin dies. It cracks, it bleeds, then freezes, then shatters like ceramic. Your feet swell, then blister, then peel. You walk on raw nerves, then on nothing. Some cut their toes off with heated blades to stop the rot from crawling. Others don't bother. They know what's coming next. Muscle deterioration follows quickly. Your legs atrophy, your arms weaken. You drop things. You fall often. And every fall risks frostbite, a broken bone, or worse, a night you don't rise from. You begin to shake involuntarily, not from fear, but from thermal misfire. Your body tries to generate heat by spasming your muscles, but there's no fuel left to burn. The shivering eventually stops. That's when it gets dangerous. Because stillness is not peace. Stillness is surrender. Your joints stiffen until every movement feels like dragging rusted metal across concrete. Knees lock. Shoulders freeze. Your neck becomes a fixed hinge. You stop turning your head to save the effort. You stop blinking as often. Your eyes grow dry, then weep, then freeze at the corners. Eyelids stick together in the morning. Lashes fall out. The corners of your mouth crack every time you speak. Soon, you stop speaking. The cold doesn't just attack your exterior, it infiltrates your core. Your organs begin to slow. The kidneys falter first, filtering blood sluggishly, then ceasing altogether. Toxins build. Urine darkens, then stops entirely. The heart tries to compensate, but blood thickens in the cold. Circulation slows. Your pulse drops. Your fingertips, already black, grow colder. Eventually, you stop feeling cold at all. That's the final warning. You experience what's known as paradoxical undressing. Your brain, failing from hypothermia, convinces you that you are overheating. You strip your clothes off with fumbling fingers. You lie down in the snow, believing it's a warm bed. Your breath slows. Your thoughts become calm. You forget why you were afraid. You forget what you were waiting for. Your mind pulls images from your childhood, summer fields, warm rain, the sun on your skin. It welcomes you back. This is your body's last lie, and you believe it. Before that happens, you may go blind. Not from trauma, but from malnutrition, dehydration, and nerve degradation. Blurry vision turns to tunnel vision, then to gray. Your hearing goes too, not all at once, but gradually, until voices become muffled, like they're speaking from another room. The world narrows. Sensation disappears. You become a passenger in a vehicle that is no longer moving. The hunger fades too, replaced by apathy, not peace, emptiness. The part of your mind that once screamed for survival now falls quiet. You've seen others reach this point. You've watched them curl in corners and breathe their last without a sound. There's no drama, no begging, just stillness. And then the skin tightens, the eyes glaze, and they're gone. You told yourself you were different, smarter, stronger, more prepared. But now, as you sit against a wall, too cold to lean on, as you cradle hands you can no longer feel, you realize you are exactly the same, human, fragile, mortal, and breaking. There is no cure for this, no fire, no medicine, no prayer. Once the body begins to fail, there is only one direction left: downward. And just before you reach the end, just before your eyes close for the last time, a single thought flickers through your fading mind. Not a scream, not a memory, a whisper. One last, bitter realization before the silence takes you. You can no longer tell how long you've been sitting there. The storm outside has passed, or maybe it hasn't. You can't hear it anymore. Maybe the wind still screams beyond the walls, but your ears have stopped delivering the message. Your limbs are folded awkwardly, but the pain that once defined your existence is gone. Even the cold has dulled. It no longer bites or burns. It simply is, a constant presence around you, within you, beneath your skin, behind your eyes. It feels like the world has grown still in reverence, holding its breath while you fall apart. You can no longer move your fingers. You can't lift your head. But your mind is still here, flickering like the last ember of a dying fire. Your thoughts no longer form in sentences. They come in fragments, images, smells, memories you didn't know you still carried. The sound of your mother's voice calling you in for dinner. The crunch of leaves under your boots on a fall afternoon. The way warm coffee felt in your hands when the world still had mornings. The softness of skin beneath fingertips. The sound of laughter behind closed doors. A sunlit room, a meal with friends. The feeling of being full. It is not the face of a loved one that you remember first. It is the light. Not artificial light. Not bulbs or LEDs. Sunlight. The golden kind that filters through curtains and catches the dust in the air. The kind that warms your back as you sit in a room you no longer live in a time you no longer inhabit. For a moment, you are there again. You are young, safe, full of breath and strength. The cold is gone. The silence is peace, not absence. And then your thoughts drift to the world itself. What it was, what it became, what it could have been. The absurdity of it all. The speed of the collapse. The warnings ignored. The knowledge wasted. The fact that humanity, with all its brilliance, was undone not by weapons or aliens or divine wrath, but by a few degrees of temperature and a refusal to change. You feel the weight of it in your chest. Not anger, not even sadness. Just the dull ache of knowing it didn't have to end this way. There is no final gasp, no dramatic fall, no internal monologue rising into a scream. You are not special. You are not the last. You are simply one more. One more body gone still. In the quietest extinction event the planet has ever seen. The cold takes you, not like a killer, but like a tide. It seeps in, and you let go. And just before the final moment, just before your consciousness dissolves completely, one thought whispers through your fading mind, clear, sharp, and unbearably human. I should have been warmer. Then there is nothing. But your story is not the only one. Multiply your death by billions. Scatter it across cities, mountains, oceans, and bunkers, and you begin to see the shape of what we lost and what it means for those who still believe they could survive it. The world did not explode. It did not burn. It did not end in fire or violence or the drama of Hollywood spectacle. It ended in silence, in stillness, in cold. The 2050 Ice Age was not just the collapse of temperature. It was the collapse of everything we mistook for permanent. Cities, technology, governments, faith, community, identity. All of it eroded beneath a blanket of white that buried not only our bodies, but our hubris. We had the warnings, the models, the data. We had decades of knowledge and millions of voices begging for change. But comfort is louder than caution. The climate tipped, and so did everything with it. And when it finally came, it was faster than we imagined, colder than we were prepared for, and far more complete than we ever thought possible. This story wasn't about a lone survivor. There were none. It wasn't about human resilience. Even the strongest broke. It wasn't about rebuilding. Nothing was left to build with. It was about one simple truth, that survival isn't just about grit or strength or willpower. It's about timing, preparation, and understanding that nature does not negotiate. The Ice Age of 2050 was nature reasserting its rule, and humanity, so powerful, so clever, so confident, was reduced to breathless whispers in empty shelters, frozen into place before we even had time to mourn. You were never meant to survive this, and neither was anyone else. If this journey made you feel the weight of fragility, if it made you imagine what the world could become, if it left you colder, quieter, or more grateful for the warmth you still have, then subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button so others find this story. And tell us in the comments, what would you do if the Ice Age came tomorrow? Could you survive it? Or, more importantly, would you want to?